What's up, people? Welcome to this episode of the By the Hood podcast or webcast because I don't know how you're consuming this content. I'm your host, as always. My name is Jimmy. And before I say anything else, just want to, start the show with gratitude as we always do. Thank you to everybody who subscribes, shares our content, all of our students in By the Hood University that have taken our courses, just everyone who's pretty much showing us support and helping us spread the mission. Also, got my brother Corey in the building. Corey, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm living, man. I done lived through, the Rona, death hornets, and now, through this recession. So I feel like, I can live through anything at this point.
I mean, but it looks like the Rona is coming back, though. According to the news, all the news I'm reading, it looks like and I see the market this morning on that news took a little tumble, but it looks like Rona's not going.
I guess. I've been socially distant the vast majority of my life. So,
That's not changing anything for you, huh? How is it out in Texas? I know you're in Texas for the summer. Well, you I don't know. You coming back? You left. You got to living down there. You might not want to come back to Philly.
hey, man, it's good to have choices. So, but I mean, right now, I'm feeling good, man. It makes me, you know, appreciate, a lot of the decisions I made to have the choices that I have to be able to
Absolutely.
do what I'm doing. So.
Absolutely, that's amazing. So our show, as always, and our platform is used to highlight people that look just like us, that are doing amazing things in the community, in business, in law, education, whatever it may be. We want to make sure we highlight these people, and also see what we can learn from them. So it's about learning, not just for you listening or watching, but we like to learn from people as well. And listen, our next guest is doing amazing work, and one of the things she's going to talk about is something that we really haven't had anyone on to talk about, and it's very important when we talk about building wealth. We talk about investing, we talk about real estate, we talk about stocks, we can talk about index funds, all those things. But it's not just enough to create wealth. It's about keeping it and making sure the next generation understands what it means to have wealth and make sure it passes through to them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest for this episode, attorney at law, Rhonda Anderson. How are you?
Good. How are you? Good morning. How's everyone doing?
Good
Oh man,
morning.
we're doing amazing. We
Good.
definitely wanted to bring you on, and first off, I want to send a shout out to Janice, our sister, because she made this connection because she supports everything we do, and she loves you as well. And she says, "You two got to get together." So, Janice, I know you're gonna listen to this. Want to say,
Thank you,
we
Janice.
we love you and we appreciate it, because this is important, right? So we're going to get into exactly what you do and some tips you have for people. But before we do that, can you give us a little bit about your background? Where are you from? What city you from? What school did you go to?
Sure. So I'm from Philly. I grew up in Mount Airy, Germantown area. Graduated from King High School.
Hmm.
Went to IUP, which is near Pittsburgh. Came back and got my law degree from Temple, and then went back to school to LaSalle to get my MBA in finance.
Oh, nice.
So I'm pretty local.
That's nice. It's beautiful. That's beautiful. We're
Yeah.
all fully born and bred. Let me ask you a question though. After getting a law degree, what made you want to go back and get an MBA? I see that a lot.
So I worked with a lot of nonprofits and charter schools at the firm that I was working at the time. And what I realized is my clients didn't call us unless there was a problem, right? So whether or not the police are at the door or just, they tried to figure out situations. And because at the time, charter schools are relatively new, they were trying to do buildings, they were trying to buy buildings. So it was all these different things that I realized is they needed more probably in-house counsel. Like they needed somebody who had some experience with financing, real estate, things like that. So I just took a leap and I left the firm I was at. I went back to school full time. I did it. I felt like I should do it while I was somewhat, young and had some energy. And it's worked because it helps me not just give a legal perspective to things, but also a consulting and finance and a perspective that I think a lot of folks in our community don't necessarily have.
Hmm.
And sometimes we rely on people who are maybe not necessarily giving us the best, work in our best interest. So I just
All right.
decided to walk the plank and go back to school.
That's amazing. So yeah, a highly educated person right there. The
Uh,
MBA, the law degree. That's amazing. Well, congratulations for all of
Thank
that.
you.
And that's very inspiring. So, with that being said, I know one of the things that we talked about is estate planning. That's like something that you're really passionate about.
I am.
So before we get into what you actually do with estate planning, why are you so passionate about that with our community?
So I would say because it's probably one of the most misunderstood areas of law. So a lot of times, when folks look like us think about lawyers, we think about criminal lawyers. We think about sometimes, maybe it's like certain things like bankruptcy or just different, very specific things that we only think about that we need lawyers for. And what I find is that estate planning is misunderstood, and it's also something that I think is not really targeted towards people in our community, but we need it the most. So I think it's one of those things. I am a member of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, and we have legal ministry. And years ago, we used to do these law clinics, and we would do a couple a year. Our biggest clinic was when we would do free wills. So we would do free wills to the community. We'd get a bunch of lawyers volunteer. We'd be there all day long on a Saturday. And it grew so much that we were starting to do wills and power of attorneys, things like that for people upwards of probably 700, 800 people a day. So that showed me that, there's a need. We just don't know. We're not educated enough about it to know that this is something that, we should be focusing on.
Yeah, and I want to co-sign that because for a couple of reasons, right? One of the things we always preach when we do a lot of our work in the community is the whole idea of don't lose Granny's house, because that's like a phenomenon in our community.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times it's because it wasn't properly planned in terms of the estate, or grandma was trying to take care of 15 kids. So she listed to 15 people at one time.
Absolutely.
And they can't decide what they want to do and they lose it. And so I see that literally all the time. So I think that's also important. Also, this past year, I lost my mother. But the one thing I can say about that is because she had her paperwork straight, it actually helped us in the grieving process, because it wasn't a lot of things that we had to think about. Because so that's another thing about this. Another a point to look at. When you have all your paperwork in place, when you go to a transition, that the next generation doesn't have to really worry about anything. You have it all set up beforehand. I have a question for you. Something that I get asked all the time, and I really don't know the answer to this, but if someone doesn't have anything, is anything wrong with them going on one of those websites, LegalZoom or something like that, and just getting a will or something right there just written up?
So it depends. So if you have what I consider maybe a basic estate, sometimes something is better than nothing, right? What I encourage people to do, though, if they do go on LegalZoom or they go to Staples to get something, is maybe have an attorney review it. Because the challenge is that with LegalZoom, I've seen wills where people have left their estates to their dogs, because LegalZoom doesn't know that your dog is not a person, right? So LegalZoom is only going to spit out what you put in there. So you may not know that there, especially if you have children. Like, I think there's certain parameters. If you have children, property, you need to sit down and talk to somebody. Gotcha. Because another human being could say to you, well, did you consider this? Did you consider that? LegalZoom can't do that. It's just, like, I'm going to put something in. And I literally saw a will where everything was left to the dog, not left to a person to take care of the dog, but left to a dog. So
could you explain to us real fast what you mean by like a simple estate?
Okay. So I would say if you are single, maybe you do have a property, you're enough what you want to do. So I want to leave this particular object or property to this person. I want to name a particular person as my executor. That's it. These are my beneficiaries. Simple means that you kind of have it in order. It gets a little bit more complex when children are involved, when you're married. There's certain laws that, depending upon your state, that say you may not be able to exclude your spouse. You may not, LegalZoom's not necessarily going to tell you that.
Okay.
If you have maybe more than one property, if you have a business. So there's certain things, especially if you have children under the age of 18, like there's certain trust issues that you have to make sure that, you could leave all these things to someone, but you may not necessarily know that if you have children under the age of 18, a court has to appoint like a guardian for them. So, so there's certain intricacies that I think that, let's start with this. I think almost everybody needs a will. Let's start honestly, right? So let's start with that. I think when people say to me they don't want a will because they don't have anything, I was just
getting ready to ask you that, because I hear that all the time.
It's just, that's what I hear. I don't have anything. Okay, but you do, right? So you have loved ones. You have some assets, more than likely. And what I tell people is you're drafting a will today for the future you. Right? Because the future you may have a retirement account with your job. You may buy some property. I have a client who swore me down. I don't have anything. We did her will anyway. And a year later, unfortunately, she got hit by a bus. The benefit to that is that she had $1 million settlement, but she already had a will in place. You know what I mean? So it's, you're trying to leave instructions really for the future you. A will can always be changed. I have one client who changes her will annually. She gets sick of people. Every year I can rely on her calling me that we're going to change, and I'm okay with that. You know, she took me seriously when I said, as long as you're living and you're in your right mind, you can always change this, and she does, and she takes me to it. So there's very few people that don't need some type of estate plan. And honestly, a good lawyer will sit down with you and say to you, listen, this is what you need. You know, it doesn't have to be this extraordinary amount of money either. You know what I mean? It really doesn't. I think that's another, misconception, that you're going to get some things. The reason I think it's important for you to sit down with people who look like you maybe in your community is that so that you're not oversold, so that you're not, somebody with one house who's getting like a trust where it's a binder that's this thick. Like, some people they just don't need that. So I think it's important. You can sense that I say this important, but you need to at least have a conversation with somebody to leave some instructions. And that's what a will is. You're just leaving instructions. It's, I think Jimmy's point about his mom is true, because it's difficult to grieve and handle a lot of things at the same time. Death brings out a lot of strangeness in people. Mom promised me that leather jacket. No, she didn't. So if you leave instructions, and the other thing about leaving instructions is, especially as a parent, you know your children. You know which one is going to do right. You know which one not going to leave the house. So don't leave that burden to somebody else to deal with. Just leave some instructions.
So let me ask you I have a couple questions, because this is an interesting topic to me that I always want to have a conversation about. So one of the things that I see a lot of times in real estate is my specialty, is where you just said something that made me think about this when you said parents know your children, right? So I see a lot of times in our community where they'll try to leave it to a grandmother, try to leave it to, like, I was joking saying 15, but I've seen the most I've seen is like 6 or 7, 6 or 7 grandkids. A couple of them ain't worth nothing. Some of them are doing amazing things, and then like they argue, and they'll end up losing the property.
Yes.
So I just tell clients, listen, you know which one of your kids is the more responsible one. Have them control it, and then if they want to sell it and split it, whatever they want to do, but don't lose it.
Right.
I'd rather them not sell it. I'd rather us hold on to the property in our community. But at the end of the day, if the options are losing it or selling it and keeping that money, like, right. What do you say to someone that has multiple kids or what have you, 3 or 4 kids, like, and they have a couple pieces of real estate? Like, do you just...
So what I say is, it's hard to split a house. So you think about it, like, you can't split a baby. It's hard to split a house, right? Because you just can't split a house in threes. And in all likelihood, what happens is you have 3 children, 2 have their own houses, right? 2 are living their lives and their thing. You got one who's just sitting there. He's 45. He's living in the basement. He's never leaving.
So you've seen this too.
I see this all the time. So what I try to do is I try to talk to the parents when the children aren't in the room. And I just have this conversation to say, I have watched estates where the biggest beneficiaries are the lawyers, because the people are fighting, and you have spent everything up on lawyers because you can't figure this out. So I recommend a couple things. I say, who's the most responsible child? Like, who's the one who's really the one? And usually the responsible child is the one who called me in to begin with. So that's the person you name as the executor that you have who can make the decisions. I also say it's difficult to even leave a property to more than 2 to 3 people. It's just difficult, because how do they decide who's going to pay what? So am I going to let Junior live in the house and I'm going to pay the taxes? And my brother's going to pay, the water, while Junior's just like, so if that's your intent, you got to really think this through to say, how are they going to live together? How are they going to use the property? Then how are you going to leave the property to them? Are you going to leave it to them where they own it jointly, and if one of them dies, the other 2 get it? Or is it, if one of them dies, his wife steps in, and now you hated your daughter-in-law, right? I say this to the mothers all the time. You hated your daughter-in-law, so now your daughter-in-law is not maybe one of the owners. So let's just think about this. You know what I mean? Usually once I put all of those scenarios in place, I usually have moms say, I leave my estate, I direct such and such to my executor to handle it. I also allow her, if she has to sell it. Like if they can't, I appreciate that I want to leave this in the legacy in the family. If she can't, it's fine. It could be
Mhm.
sold, and then they just split the proceeds.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And the next question I have is about trust. So do you like establish trust for
Hmm.
people as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So with
Um,
trust, go ahead. I was gonna
no, I
say.
was going to ask you because is that something that like because that's something another thing that I don't have that lot of experience in, but I would
Mhm.
like to learn. It's because as you acquire assets now, it goes from acquiring assets to learning how to control and protect them for a long time. So just as a backdrop, I read a book this past year. It was called Family Wealth by James Hughes, right?
Okay.
So I thought this book was going to be about like establishing a family bank, and it was all about like trust and preserving the assets that you accumulate over time.
Okay.
And one of the points that he made in the book is doesn't matter how much you can accumulate financially if you don't leave that wisdom and knowledge with the next generation of how to control it.
That's right.
So, and trust was a big part of that. So, is that something that our community needs to be looking more into?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially since and I would say Philadelphia is unique in this because we are somewhat emerging in the real estate. Like, we were undervalued for so many years, and we have these out of state investors coming in. So we actually as a community are probably sitting on most of our wealth, right? Like
Mhm.
we probably have, these reemerging gentrified neighborhoods. So I think it's important to at least talk to somebody about a trust, because what a trust does in some respects is it contains the wealth. So it contains it. So you may have properties that you transfer to the trust. You leave instructions, same thing. You appoint a trustee. You have people, you have beneficiaries. In a trust, you could also establish when people get what. So again, you may have children, and you may say, 21, are you necessarily really ready to get this? Maybe at 21, you get part of your money, right? Or maybe at 30, you get the rest of it. So a trust is good because it allows you to kind of make all these decisions. And then in some respects, trusts can also avoid probate. So what probate is when you have a will, or if you don't have a will, you got to go down to city hall, you got to be appointed. So there's all these different things that happen. A trust can avoid that. A trust doesn't always necessarily avoid inheritance tax, though, but you can have certain trusts that do. You can have certain trusts that you transfer all the property to the name of the trust. Um, as long as you, the person, don't necessarily have control over it, you appoint a trustee, you could avoid probate, you could avoid inheritance taxes. Trusts are seemingly important for our community now because you could have a trust that helps you avoid what's called Medicaid recovery.
Mhm.
So we're an aging population. Um, if mom or somebody has to go into a nursing home, and if you just don't have the $10,000 a month to pay for it, we apply for Medicaid. So, which is our right as older people. You apply for Medicaid. Medicaid doesn't want you to have assets though. So now, if you plan this 10 years before mom has to go, now, unfortunately, I get calls the day before they want to put mom into a home, and that's not planning. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. Let's say you plan this out 10 years before, you put these things in trust, you could create a family trust that those assets aren't mom's. So it doesn't
Mhm.
count against mom. You still keep the properties in the family,
Wow.
but you don't lose those. So these are the conversations we need to start having and having now.
Yeah. See, this is next
Because
level. This is the stuff that I don't know. And it's like it's
yeah,
making my brain
Yeah,
work now because I know how to get the wealth, but like
yeah,
these
we
little
got to keep
secrets,
it.
these little secrets that that actually like help you keep it, but also man, help you actually I shouldn't say work within the system, right? Let's say it that
Absolutely,
way.
absolutely,
yeah.
um
absolutely.
so I have another question. So Corey and I, we do a free camp every summer for the kids in the community. We teach them how to invest, right? So we have a lot of and salute to all the parents that come out and help us with the camp. But a lot of the kids, and we start from ages 5 on up. A lot of them have started like brokerage accounts, and they're buying assets and
Nice,
things like
nice.
this. My question is, and this is a question for myself because like my nephew's one of the students as well. Should Can you build up a trust over time? So should they be buying these in trust now, or is it okay for them just to have them, in their name? Like so how does the trust work? Is the trust something that we can build up over time? Like if I set a trust up for my nephew now, can we continue to
Mhm.
acquire things in his trust?
Absolutely, absolutely. You could have trust for your children. You could, and what the trust is, it's a document, but you're also transferring assets to the name of the trust. So let's say you bought a property, you had no mortgage on it, and you decided you want to leave it to your nephew. Your nephew could, you could have it in your trust that says, I leave this to my nephew in trust for him. Same thing. So you could build up the assets and then transfer them to a trust. So you could, there's a lot of ways you could
A lot of
do
ways
it,
you do it.
but
Okay.
you probably just got to get started doing something.
Okay. Oh
Yeah.
man, that's next level. So man, Corey, I know you had something you want to chime in with.
Yeah, so we around death, I mean, there's a lot of infighting for stuff, and I'm one of those people like, look, leave it to somebody else, let them have it. I don't, whatever, what I mean, like I don't really want to get involved in all of that, because I'd rather just grieve and,
Yeah.
and and do for my kids or whatever.
Yeah.
So what do you do when there's a will in place and they're still infighting about what you know gets distributed
Mhm.
inside the will?
Even when it's already in writing.
Yeah, because all right, so like for an example, I'm trying to do this with some tact because these people are still living,
Okay.
but there's a will in place
Mhm.
and it says distribute this to XYZ, but it doesn't specify all of the stuff. So it says distribute the house to the person A and
Okay.
distribute all of the assets to person B.
Okay.
But person B doesn't want the assets, they just want the house. And then the
Mm.
other person, they want all of the, and so it's distributed wrong. The person
Gotcha.
wrote the
Okay.
will
Okay.
and they thought they knew
Yeah.
what the two people wanted, and it was actually the opposite.
Right.
So how do you?
So typically the way it works is, usually you hire an attorney, the attorney advises and say, okay, so here's what it seems like the intent was of grandma. Grandma's not
Yeah.
here. If there's no agreement or if there's still like this confusion, I mean, and the law sets some things out too in terms of what's considered a specific bequest. You know what I mean? Like, does the house include the assets or, but sometimes wills are by humans. So sometimes they're just not written to a T. So you go to court and the judge decides. So you got to
Okay.
pay somebody. So you got more money coming out now, but you go to court and, both sides will present and a judge will make a determination and order what happens. One of the things that I include in my wills is a clause that says if you contest it, you get nothing,
Mm.
right? So sometimes that encourages people, because it's
Yeah.
a gift, you get a gift. So sometimes that encourages people not to fight. So I have a no contest provision in all my wills. If you want to fight about this, you get nothing.
Gangster.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I was
Yeah.
looking for.
Right, right.
But these are some of the
That's what.
things. These are some of the things that we need to know. Rhonda, you've given us a lot of amazing information. Let me ask you a question. Throughout this journey of going from, you're coming out of King, you're going to, get your undergrad, law school, the whole thing, to where you are now, as seasoned as you are, and obviously you have a lot of information. What would you say is the biggest hurdle that took you to get from, starting out to where you are now?
Wow, biggest hurdle. I would say honestly, as a Black woman who once was a young Black teenager, trying to convince people and myself that I belonged here. And that was really a journey. I can remember being in high school. I transferred to King from Bodine, and I had a lot of credits my junior year. So it didn't make sense for me to stay for to my senior year because I could graduate early. So I remember going to the principal at the time to get permission to to sign off for me to graduate early. And he said, "You'll never make anything of yourself. This is stupid. Just stay here. You'll never make anything of yourself." So I remember telling my mother, and my mother took me back to school the next day, and she was like, "You're going to sign." But what people don't realize is when you deposit things like that, it sticks, right? So it stuck with me because I would always have this notion of maybe he was right. You know what I mean? And I can remember then getting to law school. And, there's maybe 10 of us in our class, who looked like us. And I could recall very heightened arguments about how, we didn't deserve to be there. We're only there because of affirmative action. And so all these things. So these things, they stick with you, right? So you always sometimes will have this imposter syndrome of like, well, do I belong here? Am I? And so what I started realizing is the people that I were around, they weren't that smart. I mean, they have some advantages, right? And I'm not saying this like I come from, I come from doctors and lawyers and my families and everything like that. So I was constantly poured into. Don't get me wrong, I was constantly poured into during these situations. But then I was surrounded by people that just really weren't that smart. They may have had some other advantages and some, you know what I mean, some obstacles that were moved out of their way, but at the end of the day, they weren't that smart.
Mm-hmm. And that's true. You
Yeah.
realize it all the time, right?
No, that's gangster.
Yeah,
That's real, but that's real.
that was it. So I just, you know what I mean? So it's just like I just continue. So then so then when you learn things that the other people are doing, you want to bring it back to your people. To say like, come on, y'all, we can do this. You know, like I'm a property owner. You know what I mean? My husband and I bought a duplex years ago because somebody told us like, do it. And we were like, we don't know about being a landlord. Come on, just do it. Come on, I'll help you. You know what I mean? Like, come on, I'll help you figure this out. So
that's so crucial. That's so
next
crucial.
Generation, like
because all of us have had someone. Yeah, all of us have had someone to do that. Yeah, right, yeah. So and that's why it's important for us to do it to the next generation, right?
So now that's how we build. With the protests, with COVID, like this world is crazy. With all this now, it's our responsibility to stand in the gap for the next generation, right? Exactly. We have to. So we've got to educate them. We got to help them out. We got to teach them to. Sometimes they got to leave the corporate world and walk the plank and start their own thing. But we got to stand in the gap now.
Absolutely. Oh man,
yeah.
that's powerful because it's so it's because it's so true, right? It's always someone that told us, hey, this is what you need to be. It's always someone, and you have to make sure. And the more information you get, we should be bringing back because they're not smarter than us. That also goes to what me and Corey talk about, which is called brand washing. Another excellent book called Brand Wash. But a lot of times because of we don't control the narrative in our media, we start to believe these stereotypes, and they're not smarter. They're not smarter than us at all. So also, what kind of, do you have any sort of book that you've ever read? What's your favorite book, or what has inspired you along your journey?
So my favorite book is this very obscure book that it's nothing like inspirational. It's called Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Oh, Jim Collins.
Yeah.
Put the right people on the bus.
That's right. And you got to get the wrong ones off the bus, right?
That's right. That's one of my favorites.
So I find myself quoting from that book. I read it easily 10, 15 years ago. And I find myself quoting from that book a lot and sharing a lot of that, in terms of people, like in terms of building, like having the good people on your team. You could create so much more. Getting rid of the wrong people, and that's something I think we don't necessarily think about. I think in terms of real estate, you need a team, right? So you need to have, if you're renting out a property, you need to have a good a management team, right? Somebody's got to collect rent, or so you need somebody who's going to fix stuff, the plumbing. At some point you're going to need a lawyer and maybe an accountant. So team building is important, and you need to build teams early, right? So that I know when I get a call from my tenant that something's leaking, I could text my plumber, and because he's gonna, but I'm gonna keep him busy. You know what I mean? I'm gonna make sure that he's getting work, things like that. So I think the concept of good people on your team, how good people will work for you. They will. You know what I mean? Like, you encourage them, you build them up, they get something out of it. People, building up people, I think is probably the thing that we don't consider as much as we should. So I learned that from Jim.
Yes, and people are assets too, right? So and here's the thing: people are assets, but some of them are also liabilities, right?
So right. You gotta learn early, right?
And that's interesting.
That worked compared to ones that don't work. What is it?
You bring that book up. That's like one of my wife's favorite. That's actually her favorite business book. But she also has an MBA from the South. So I wonder if that's something. They
probably made us read it.
That's what made me think about that, because I know you got the MBA from the South. So does she, and that's like her.
Make sure we put that on our book list.
It's already there. Because again, I love that book. I love that book, and that's the one thing I always remember about that. Putting the right people, because I see so many times, even when we go to analyze a company, Corey, we're looking at a company in the market, and you see that they're putting the wrong people, and we talked about
the first thing. That's one of the first things I look at. Like, who is the CEO, and what is that CEO's track record of building teams and building building corporations.
So it goes to big businesses and small, but you got to put the right people on the bus, but it also works in your life too, just in life in general. So great choice. So Rhonda, listen, you've given us a ton of information.
Hold on. Before she goes, what's the future?
I'm going to ask you another question though. But go ahead. You ask your question. Go ahead.
What's the future for your business?
That's where I was going.
Wow. So this is interesting because obviously these last 3 months for everybody have been, a complete change and everything else. So I think the future for my business, I've been really trying to think about this. So because and this is just practical, we have had to do a lot of Zoom hearings, right? So, and I actually have a Zoom hearing after this. So what I'm trying to do is probably do a better infrastructure job with my business, right? So now I know I probably need to invest in putting everything in the cloud, right? So now I got to sit here and it's going to go all this stuff to put everything in the cloud. I have to be more mobile. I have to be on the front line of not necessarily relying on sitting in an office with somebody, right? So I have to think of things that in terms of doing more online stuff, doing more remote stuff. So that's the practical part of the business. I think from a holistic kind of approach, I think about this as we're going to come out of this, right? So where are the areas or the industries that are going to be burgeoning, right? What are the things now that, we're going to dust off and be like, oh, that's it. That's the next thing. So I think being flexible, and knowing that, in the beginning of this situation, beginning of COVID, it was depressing for me because I had clients dying, and that's tough. You know what I mean? It's although my clients, so I had to get through that because I got to support these families and different things. But then I started thinking about it and saying, what is the next thing? Because we have to be on the next thing before everybody else is.
Absolutely.
Right. So we got to figure out whether or not we got to hoard our cash or, work together. But I think what this has taught me, even with the protest, is we have a lot of capital as Black people. We have a lot of capital, and we got to start doing better at using our influence. And honestly, just trying to, again, stand in the gap for the next generation. So business wise, I'm excited. I have no idea why. I just know that.
Well,
it's a whole new
exciting time.
It's a whole new world.
Yeah, so I feel just like I'm excited. Like I'm really excited because I think we're gonna make some impacts in industries that we weren't really invited to.
It's like before Corona and after Corona. Like
right. I think
BC
social justice. I think getting other people while we have. And I don't know if I can say this because I know I don't want to say this, but while we have the attention of people who may feel guilty and want to do stuff and put out statements,
use that white guilt against them. Yeah.
How about you start putting out an agenda of what you want them to do. Don't just let them put a statement on the website and we feel free. No. If you want to really start investing, invest in us. Don't just only invest in, maybe you want to invest in us as a nonprofit because you want to write us off. No, you start thinking about how you're going to invest in us and get a return on investment. Treat us like you treat everybody else. Invest in us.
We talked about that, how they can send out emails, but you look at their C-suite and their board. Right. There's nobody that looks like us.
You can look at some of these diversity and inclusion teams, and it's just like
it's a lot of men. It's 5 men and 5 women, so they call it inclusion and diversity, and it doesn't include any.
And it ain't diverse.
Right? It ain't diverse at all. Right. Yeah, it's trash.
So that's why I see this. Start investing. Start really writing some checks.
Absolutely.
I'll be impressed when y'all do that.
Absolutely. So, listen, Rhonda, this has been excellent and very, very informative, and we definitely will remain in touch with you because what you're doing is very important. This is the other side of what we talk about all the time. So I just want to say first.
Yeah, she closes the circle on the wealth. Because we do the building and education, and she closes the circle by protecting that whatever you built in that educational piece.
And there's another piece that I just realized from this conversation. It's like part of what she does actually can be used to build wealth if you use it strategically. So it's all about being strategic with it. But this has been very informative and much success and first of all, thank you for what you do. And second of all, much success to everything that you're going to do moving forward. We will be in touch and we will send people your way when asked because, again, it's a valuable resource. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I like the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
You're vocal, you're out there. I appreciate this. And I appreciate this platform too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we'll make people out there watching, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share this because we need this kind of information in our communities. Give us feedback. We will make sure that we put her contact information within the description. So if anyone's looking for her services, you can actually take advantage of that. We'll put her website there as well. So to our folks out there, make sure you share this video again. Corey, any last words you got to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, I appreciate the time that you spent with us, because we know you got a law degree and a business degree, so you know about time and money. So the time you spent with us
it's valuable.
It's very valuable. So what you gave us was a gem. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. So for the people out there, as we always say, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep. Game elevates, and we'll see y'all guys on the next episode. Peace.